The conference room buzzed with chatter. As I glanced at my phone, its screen lit up with an incoming call from Tyler. I stepped into the hallway, expecting the usual small talk. "How's the trip? When will you be home?" Instead, Tyler's voice came through cold and smug. "I'm divorcing you," he said, his tone almost triumphant. "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the complete lack of remorse, it was almost laughable. My hand tightened around the phone as his words sunk in. "You sold the apartment?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah," he said with a dry laugh. "Nicole and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that." Nicole. The name stung, though I'd suspected for months that there was someone else. Tyler's late nights and sudden work trips all pointed to a third party. But to hear him speak her name so casually lit a fire in my chest. "Sounds good," I replied evenly. There was no way I was giving him the satisfaction of hearing me crack. "My name is Amelia, and up until that phone call, I thought I'd married a man I could trust." Tyler and I had been together for 6 years, and while things hadn't always been perfect, I'd believed in our partnership. We had worked hard to buy our cozy 2-bedroom apartment in the city, a symbol of everything we'd built together. Looking back, there had been signs, small cracks in the foundation I'd ignored. Tyler's dismissive attitude about finances and his tendency to brush off my concerns had always been there. I had assumed his confidence came from knowing what he was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing he could manipulate me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments while my mind raced. Tyler thought he'd won. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me and walk away scot-free. But there was one crucial detail he didn't know: the apartment deed had been in my name alone for months. I'd had it transferred after we refinanced earlier in the year, a move Tyler had agreed to without much thought. His carelessness was going to be his undoing. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my shock had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry or beg. Tyler wanted to fight? Fine, but this was a fight I was going to win. The first call I made was to Chloe, my lawyer and longtime friend. I laid out the situation in detail, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. "He sold the apartment," she repeated incredulously. "Does he even realize that he can't do that without your consent?" "Apparently not," I said, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone. "He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Nicole." Chloe laughed dryly. "Well, he's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if he's taken any money from the buyer, he's on the hook for fraud." The word fraud sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. "What do we need to do?" I asked. "First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal," Chloe said. "Then we'll draft a formal letter for Tyler outlining the consequences of his actions. If he's dumb enough to try anything else, we'll take him to court." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Tyler thought he'd outsmarted me, but in reality, he'd just set himself up for humiliation. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, compartmentalizing my emotions and channeling my energy into the task ahead. The betrayal hurt, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching Tyler's smugness crumble gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready to face Tyler, ready to dismantle his lies, and ready to start a new chapter without him. This wasn't just about winning, it was about taking back control. The flight home gave me hours to think about how everything had unraveled. Tyler's arrogance was astounding. He hadn't even tried to hide his betrayal. Instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on what I'd do when I returned. Tyler thought I was powerless, but he didn't realize I'd been playing the long game. As the plane touched down, my first call was to Chloe. "I'm back," I said as I hauled my suitcase off the luggage carousel. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked and not too happy with Tyler. They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case. And Tyler? I asked. I sent the formal letter to his email this morning, she said. It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential consequences of fraud. He hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, he's going to be furious. Good, I thought. Let him stew. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Tyler's things were still there, his jackets draped over the chair, his shoes carelessly tossed by the door, but the place felt different. I took a deep breath and set my suitcase down, knowing that the confrontation would come soon enough. Sure enough, Tyler came storming in that evening, his face red with anger and his phone clutched in his hand. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving the letter Chloe had sent. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." "No, Tyler," I said calmly, crossing my arms. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." He froze, confusion and rage mixing on his face. "What are you talking about?" I grabbed the deed from the file I'd pulled earlier, holding it up for him to see. After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do? For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression twisted into a sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." I stared at him unblinking. "The sale is already void, Tyler. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money." "Oh, and speaking of money," I took a step closer, lowering my voice, "if you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even bigger trouble." Tyler's confidence wavered for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice steady. "You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what, Tyler? I've been paying attention, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." He started pacing, frustration mounting. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, Tyler's anger turned into desperation. He called me repeatedly, leaving frantic voicemails that alternated between begging and threatening. Meanwhile, Chloe worked behind the scenes to ensure that every loose end was tied up. The buyer rescinded the agreement, furious at Tyler for wasting their time and money, and Chloe drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings. "You're in a good position, Amelia," she told me during one of our meetings. "Tyler has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over his head, he'll have to cooperate if he wants to avoid a bigger mess." Her words were a relief, but they also reminded me just how much I'd allowed Tyler to control my life for years. I'd ignored his dismissiveness and arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now I saw how much I'd been giving up, and I was determined to take it all back. Laura, my best friend, came over one evening to help me reorganize the apartment. We boxed up Tyler's things, carefully stacking them in the corner of the living room. "How's he taking all this?" she asked, holding up one of his ties with a smirk. "Not well," I said, laughing despite myself. "He's still convinced he can talk his way out of it, but I'm not budging." "Good," she said, tossing the tie into the box. "He doesn't deserve a single ounce of your space or your time." The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Tyler brought Nicole to the apartment. I was sitting at the dining table when they walked in, like they owned the place. Nicole looked around with a smug smile, her arm looped through Tyler's. "So this is where we're staying," she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "No," I said firmly. "This is where Tyler was staying. You, Nicole, won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered, and she glanced at Tyler, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," I said, gesturing to the apartment around me, "is my home. Not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you to shack up in after stabbing me in the back." Nicole's expression turned icy, but she said nothing. Tyler, on the other hand, looked like he was about to explode. "You can't do this," he shouted. "You're being unreasonable." I met his gaze unflinching. "No, Tyler. What's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, walk away with the money, and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges." For now, Tyler stood in the doorway, his face red with frustration, while Nicole crossed her arms, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous, Amelia," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a step forward, my voice calm but unwavering. "This is my home, Tyler. The deed has been in my name for months. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do." Nicole glanced at Tyler, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around her purse strap. "Wait, what's she talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You said this was your apartment, that you sold it?" He flinched, trying to wave her off. "It's complicated. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I said, stepping closer. "You tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to you. That sale is void, Tyler, and as of right now, you don't have a leg to stand on." Nicole's composure cracked. "You mean the money you told me you had?" She stopped mid-sentence, her voice rising. "Oh my God, did you lie about that too?" "Nicole, let me explain," Tyler said quickly, holding his hands up, but she wasn't having it. "No," I said, cutting him off. "Let me explain. Tyler tried to sell the apartment behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had the deed transferred to my name months ago. So not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could." Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. "Fraud," she whispered, taking a step away from him. "Are you serious?" "Yes, fraud," I said, crossing my arms. "And I'm prepared to press charges if he doesn't get his things and leave by the end of the day." Tyler's facade finally cracked. "You can't do this, Amelia," he said, his voice pleading now. "We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out." "You threw me out the moment you made that phone call," I said, my voice hardening. "You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Tyler, you tried to ruin me. So don't stand there and act like you're the victim." Nicole took another step back, her eyes darting between us. "This is insane," she muttered, clutching her purse tighter. "You didn't tell me any of this, Tyler. You said you had everything handled." He turned to her, desperation written all over his face. "Nicole, I can fix this. I just need—" She cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't. Just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess." Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving him standing there stunned. I couldn't help but smile as the door clicked shut behind her. "Looks like you're on your own," I said, turning back to Tyler. "Now let's talk about what happens next." He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Amelia, please. I screwed up, I know that, but you don't have to do this." "You're right," I said, grabbing a folder from the kitchen counter and setting it on the coffee table in front of him. "I don't have to do this, but I'm going to. This is the divorce paperwork my lawyer has already drafted, and I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on." He stared at the folder, his face pale. "You really hate me that much?" "Hate you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Tyler, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything, someone who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego." I stood, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace." He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go." "Good," I said, walking toward the door. "And don't even think about trying anything else. Chloe's already handling everything, and the next time you cross a line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it." As I opened the door, Tyler slowly stood, grabbing his coat. He didn't look at me as he walked out, his footsteps heavy with defeat. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the life we could have had if he'd been the man I thought he was. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a sense of relief. I closed the door behind him, locking it with the new key I'd had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not Tyler, would take it away from me again. The silence in the apartment after Tyler left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The space no longer felt heavy with his presence, entitlement, or lies. It was just me, the home I'd built, and the quiet realization that I had won, not just against him, but against every doubt I'd ever had about standing up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where his things had been. The oversized gaming chair, the framed jerseys cluttering the walls, and the gaudy coffee table he'd insisted on keeping were all gone. The apartment looked cleaner, brighter, like it was mine again. Laura came by that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Is he really gone?" she asked, plopping down on the couch with a dramatic sigh. "Gone and not coming back," I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I gave him until the end of the day to pack his things. He didn't argue. Lauren raised her glass to fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past week slowly lifting. To never letting someone walk all over me again. Over the next few days, I began to reclaim the apartment piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, moved my favorite artwork into the living room, and filled the space with things that made me happy. It wasn't just about redecorating, it was about turning the apartment into a reflection of who I was, not the person Tyler had tried to make me. Chloe called with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice filled with the kind of confidence that made me feel invincible. "The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer decided not to pursue them," she explained. "But the divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly. Once Tyler signs, you'll be officially free." Hearing the word free made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the divorce, it was about everything I'd been carrying for years, the resentment, the self-doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage that didn't value me. It was all finally being lifted. Tyler tried to reach out a few times, his messages ranging from half-hearted apologies to pathetic attempts to guilt me into reconciling. "I made a mistake," one read. "Can't we at least talk about this?" Another was more desperate, "You're going to ruin me, Amelia. Is that what you want?" I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. He'd made his choices, and now he was dealing with the consequences. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like a completely new space, warm, inviting, and entirely mine. As I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the city lights twinkling outside the window, I thought about everything that had happened. Tyler's betrayal had been a shock, but it had also been a wake-up call. For too long, I'd let myself believe that I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for whatever scraps of respect and love he decided to throw my way. But now I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment, I was reclaiming my life. A month later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was unrecognizable, not because of any drastic renovation, but because of how it felt. It was a space that reflected me, my tastes, my personality, and my newfound independence. The absence of Tyler's clutter and his overbearing presence made the home feel lighter. The divorce was moving along smoothly. Chloe had handled everything with precision, ensuring Tyler had no room to argue or complicate the process. He signed the papers without much fuss, likely realizing that he had no leverage. There was no grand showdown, just a cold, clean break that felt both bittersweet and deeply satisfying. One day, as I sorted through some old papers, I came across a photo of Tyler and me from our early years together. We were smiling, arms around each other, full of hope and promise. I stared at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. There had been good times, but those moments were overshadowed by years of neglect and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and put it away in a drawer. It was a part of my past, but it didn't define me anymore. Lauren and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. "Your glow is going," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast. "Single life suits you." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. It's not the single life, it's the freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules. We toasted to that, and as the night went on, I felt a growing sense of pride in myself. I'd faced one of the hardest moments of my life and come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Back at home, I started planning for the future. The apartment had become more than a refuge, it was a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. Someday, I'd move to a new place, one without any lingering shadows of my life with Tyler. Until then, I was determined to make the most of every moment in the space I had fought so hard to keep. As I curled up on the couch that night, a sense of peace washed over me. I thought about how Tyler had laughed during that phone call, so certain that he'd won, and I couldn't help but smile. His arrogance had been his downfall, and my quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I called the shots, one where I chose happiness on my own terms. And after a long time, I felt truly free.